Welcome to MRE Uncut, where we'll give you real and practical insights into the real estate scene in Melbourne. We'll discuss what's happening in the industry, all backed by MRE's history of over 30 years in the game. With that said, let's jump into this week's episode of MRE Uncut.
Thanks for joining us for another version of MRE Uncut. My name's Stephen Fitzsimon from Melbourne Real Estate. Today I'm joined by Jarrod O'Donnell, who's our head of leasing.
Thanks, Steve. Great to be here.
And I've also got Chen, who is our branch manager extraordinaire from our city office.
All right, thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
What we're looking at today is we've heard recently that the government tried to get through Parliament some changes to student intakes for their university courses to try and cool the market for residential rental properties and sort of make it a little bit easier for locals to secure accommodation during the housing crisis that we're going in. Interestingly, it didn't get through. But the impacts have already started being felt. Jeff, you were mentioning that the rate of approval of visas has changed.
Yeah, since July.
So July, what's it taking longer for them to get their visas?
They take longer, and normally, like just say we got a number, but actually it's majority of them as expected going to come in July semester, and they just couldn't get a visa.
Right.
And there's no yes or no, they just delay.
Okay, so they're just quiet.
Yes,
it's like
quiet.
They've submitted their application, they've got their enrolment details to start in the second semester of this year.
Yes.
They submit the request for the visa and they just hear donuts.
Haven't heard anything from government. So they just have to postpone to the next semester.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like the cunning way of cutting.
Correct.
Because they haven't changed the rules or around those. They just slow down the...
Yep. We assume they did the purpose,
Yeah.
It's our bill's not getting through Parliament measure, so we'll put a temporary thing in place.
Yeah. But it's interesting that the bill was only supposed to be passed a couple of weeks ago, you know, and then you're saying that it's been already slowed down from when they were sort of proposing the bill.
Correct. Yeah. As soon as the news hit the market, we see straight away dramatic change.
Right.
So it's supposed to be in a CBD market, rental market, there should be a small peak because they got a winter semester, university.
Yes.
And nothing at all.
When you say a small peak, you mean that around that June-July period, you see a peak of activity for renters arriving in the country and seeking for accommodation in the CBD close to the universities because they've just arrived and they're starting their second semester courses.
That's right, demand.
Yeah.
So this is not the main intake, but still the percentage of international students actually come in July.
Yeah.
But this year, it was very, very quiet.
Yeah,
I know we got a lot of connection with relocate agent. They got some connection. They got some clients from China, and they tell us the same thing.
Yeah, migration agents and those type of things, and they're same measure. Jarrod, there's another peak season in the year that impacts the sort of wider business in that sort of Jan to March period. Do you see the mid-year peak season hit elsewhere other than just the CBD?
No, it's all about students and I mean a lot of international students, particularly in the CBD, but any of those areas around universities, which, you know, we talk a lot about the CBD, but even those pockets in Burwood around Deakin, Clayton around Monash, Bundoora for Latrobe, you get that little pre-semester 2 intakes, and any of the places that are doing semester 3, you might get that little spurt for a few weeks or a month and a half leading up to their intakes, their start dates, or even a little bit past it, but it doesn't happen anywhere else, and it doesn't happen to the extreme that it happens before semester 1 starts at the start of the year.
Yeah, okay. So the little blip didn't happen. What are our contacts, Jeff, in relation to like these migration agents and relocation agents that you deal with? What are their predictions for the January semester 1 intake?
Yeah, they're nervous. It's always the case. They don't know what's the future going to be.
Yeah.
We all expected that sort of thing going to pass the parliament, but then a few weeks ago, didn't.
Yeah.
We all expect going to happen, on the newspaper, on social media, all of that. So now, but 100%, because this is news already spread out in China, Asian countries. So lots international students, they already decide to, give up on Melbourne, Australia. Okay. They start go to Canada, some go to Singapore, even Hong Kong. So lots of people start changing the direction because they don't want to wait.
Yeah, of course not. Yeah, when you're young and you want to do a university degree, you want to do a university degree.
Correct.
And if we're less reliable than government-wise, as a destination, then it's not hard. Like we forget, as you say, that they've got choices, and the choices, 100%. They come here, they go to Canada. I hear that all the time. The UK sometimes. Yeah. They can make that choice, and we just miss out.
Yes, it's very easy because, sorry to say that, they bring the money. They lots of countries, purely from the economy point of view, they would love to have a certain amount of international students.
Yeah,
and they take them.
Yeah. Well, you think of the amount that they contribute here.
Oh, yeah, not just tuition fee, living expense.
Yeah,
when the family come over, tourists, everything.
Yeah, it's enormous. So we look at that and we look with apprehension, really, because you don't know what's going to happen. Jarrod, are we seeing a greater than normal vacating Chinese, international, Singaporean student market now than we have historically?
Vacating, it might be a bit tricky to tell, and Jeff will know more about this, but my take would be that if people are already here and they're already enrolled and they've already started their course, no one's turning around and saying, you need to leave now, we're not going to continue with your enrollment.
Yep.
Definitely the people that haven't started yet, that's what Jeff's feeling, and City Team and all of those investors around that area, they're feeling that. But other than the standard people wanting to go home for Christmas and some of them just never returning, feel like for our existing people here, we're doing okay.
Okay. And so then the big thing is going to be January. If the intake and these visas don't arrive for the January intakes, then again in those student-centric markets, we're going to see less activity than we would have historically, because we've got fewer new arrivals, even though some people went home and don't plan to come back. And then we've got fewer new arrivals coming in. But we've got no idea because the legislation didn't pass.
Correct.
So we don't know where we're actually sitting.
Correct. Well, actually, it's a good thing, for us, because nothing changed. At the end of the day, as I said,
the sentiment has.
Correct. So you don't know exactly what's happening, especially in China. Maybe they already changed the strategy. Maybe they're already doing something. So many factors. So which is literally just waiting game. Really hard to predict.
Yeah.
Really hard to predict.
I don't know how to get stats on an amount of visas issued. Do you know what I mean? Because that's effectively what we're looking for, isn't it?
Correct.
The amount of visas issued.
Correct.
For these international students. So the aim was to reduce the numbers, but to announce it in that way before it passed Parliament has spooked the Chinese students. So then they consider, because it's obviously not their first preference, they want to come to Australia. Right. They consider then going elsewhere. If the government turns around and gives them their visas, or has given them, let's say in the meantime, they've given them, but it was after the semester 2 intake, then we might be all good and have a very busy peak season with them intake. But we just don't know.
No idea. Lots of factors, like even the living expense at the moment. Back old day, certain people, like Chinese people, they come to here instead of USA because here it's cheaper. Right. Just say. Yeah. But now the living expense also is a big factor.
Okay, so the cost of living that's impacting all of the locals is impacting the Chinese just as well. So
just give you background, and even in the past few years, actually, Chinese forgot about what the figure look like, but actually, reality is Chinese some business that is struggling in general.
Right,
they're not doing great.
Yes,
as they expected.
Right.
So obviously, whoever can afford send the kids overseas, more likely they wealthy, they have some own business or something. that sort of people actually is impact the most.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So the Chinese economy, you're suggesting, is not as reliable.
Yeah, especially for that sort of top market.
Yeah,
like
and they were the
people-
ones sending their kids.
Yeah, that's the
Because let's face it, it's
yeah.
not cheap sending your
No.
child to Australia.
very expensive. these
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, and then you've got to pay rent,
That's a big one.
and then your living expenses. So what are we talking about? Like if you think of rent of probably a couple of $100,000,
Yeah.
be close to, wouldn't it? Like what's a university course cost for an international now?
100K.
$100K.
Yeah, just for 3 years course.
Yeah.
Then you talk about living expense.
Yeah, living expenses, rent, the whole lot. It's probably
Yeah.
$250,000 for the 3 years.
Yeah.
Nice car.
Yeah, nice. Well, that's
Yeah.
when you're really starting to get
And
into
this is
the
only for living expense. We're not
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about like they do some,
Shopping.
shopping.
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
doing some like say clubbing or KTV.
Yeah.
You never know. So that also on top of it.
Yeah.
Or it's actually yeah.
So it's a significant financial investment on an individual basis
Correct.
that we risk by sending out these wrong sentiment ideas in a market which has been performing so well for us for so many years
Correct.
as a result of changes that have impacted the supply of apartments into the market, which effectively are the same changes that have turned off international investors from buying in Australia.
Yep. That's right.
Very good.
So I guess the question that you got to ask yourself is, are the international students the cause of our housing crisis, right?
No.
No.
So
why is every news article and all of
votes,
the
mate,
talk?
votes. I'd suggest it's votes.
Yeah.
It's
They can't vote.
it's
That's the problem.
just strange. I did an exercise with our 2 new starters yesterday,
Okay.
and I was trying to explain the dynamic of what's happening at the moment. I thought it was a good example.
Okay.
I asked them how many properties, and this is in the CBD. We're talking about heavily international student stock.
Yep.
How many properties do you think are currently available for rent in Melbourne? 3,000. Do either of you want to take a step?
Cool. In general, maybe 10,000.
Yeah, it's a hard question to answer. Steve, you got a stab? Right now,
Melbourne,
CBD,
3,000.
3,000.
I'd go less than that. I'd say 1,200.
You're both good. You made the sandwich. It was 4,500 currently.
Oh, wow.
We-
In Melbourne, 3,000.
Melbourne 3,000
Even
right
just
now.
now. Wow.
Right now, as we speak. But then where our housing crisis is really happening, families think of their kids and
Yeah. It's not Melbourne, 3,000.
I've got my eastern suburbs bias, and I turn to them. How many properties do you think are currently available for rent in Ferntree Gully? I know, I like the eastern
400.
Yeah, one of the girls said 400.
I'd say 40.
Yeah, it's 28.
There you go.
Yeah.
Wow.
Are these student restrictions going to help regular renters, regular housing?
No, it's all votes, mate. It's all votes.
Yeah.
It's like we're doing something about the housing crisis. You're not really.
Yeah.
You actually caused it.
Correct.
But yes, okay. Well, I really like that.
Yeah, thank you. When I was talking about it yesterday, I was like, I got to throw that out when we come in today.
Yeah.
It's just it's misguided policy, and that's why the coalition didn't let it pass the Senate the other week.
Yeah.
They said it doesn't target supply, it doesn't target the housing crisis. There are issues with supply. It's not with international students.
Yeah.
And that for me can't be the clearest example. These properties, these apartments in the CBD, regular, normal suburban renters, families, they're not going to be like, all right, it's a bit hard to find a property out in the eastern suburbs.
I'm going to move into the
Let's
suburbs.
pack up the kids and the dog, and we'll
Doesn't
take
make
that
any sense.
2-bedroom apartment on Lonsdale Street.
Yeah,
Correct.
Put the caravan underneath the house. Yeah.
We'll find some extra storage. It's just not going to make a dent.
No.
Yep.
No, it's brutal. It's brutal. So, okay, so we've got a solution to the housing crisis, which is supply, and then a government that is taking the approach of winning some votes by having a negative impact on those people that actually support the economy enormously.
That's right.
But then I asked the question, like, if you've got that as a trigger, then surely you need to reverse everything and just let them in. You know what I mean? Like, because we don't want to miss out on the 250 grand. that they're bringing in, and that's a minimum. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's $250,000 minimum that they're going to bring in for their time, and the alternative to that is we don't have anybody, and it doesn't fix supply. And those people also they're paying to rent properties in the most dense market.
Mm-hmm.
So like the construction of another 1,000 units in the CBD occupies a tiny footprint compared to trying to create another 1,000 units in Ferntree Gully, to use your example, where you'd need streets and streets done, and so that's surely got to play a role in the decision making. I find this hunt for votes as opposed to policy making really concerning.
Just a whole lot of rhetoric around an area where we just don't have an issue right now. Like our issue is not supply and availability of housing inside the CBD. Yes, if we wind back the number of international students arriving, you're going to get pockets of houses around Burwood, around Clayton, around Bundoora, Footscray coming available, but they're just pockets, and it's just 1% of the issue. It's not even close to covering all bases.
Yeah, and I look at it also because we've turned off the longing for Chinese investors to buy in Melbourne through all of the hikes in stamp duty and land tax and so forth, and to keep their properties in Melbourne because they're paying double land tax now.
That's right.
With reduced minimums and all this sort of stuff. That's going to just worsen the situation. But taking your point, the number of people who want to buy those apartments that are really suited to international students to rent, but not so much suited to local families wanting to rent, it's like we're not even going to fix it that way. Right. By frustrating those Chinese investors, they get out, and then we're just creating a bad reputation for the country as a place to invest.
Yeah. You hit on both sides. Anyone that is renting out a 3/4 acre block in the suburbs, they're getting these ridiculous land tax bills. And if the government's turning around and saying, we want you to invest in property and help us actually build the future of our society, they're pushing them to apartments. But then at the same time, by talking about stuff like this, you're also saying you can build and invest in apartments, but we're going to make it more difficult for you to house those apartments as well. So you just hit on both sides.
And they don't even stack up.
No.
Because the investors are selling their stock at a greater rate than has been in recent times, and therefore the supply is there, and therefore the price growth is slower.
Yep.
So, brutal. Oh, well, we're just going to be slamming the government again today. And we're here to talk about the Chinese students not coming across. We've opened up another can of worms.
Fortunately, it'd be something that'd be pretty easy to reverse. So the current measure that they've got out, it's the Home Affairs Minister. They put out their special order a year and a half ago. Their bill hasn't passed Parliament. We have got an election coming up, but you can rescind your temporary measure quite quickly.
Yeah. Give them the visas, get them in here, build that, and
seems like all markets around the world are doing it a bit tough at the moment. Everyone's got their interest rates very high and inflation's everywhere. So maybe it's not too late for us to bring those people back to Melbourne.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Well, we'll watch, wait, listen and learn over the next 3 to 4 months and see how things roll out for the beginning of 2025.
That's right. Yeah, cross fingers.
Cross fingers.
Yeah.
See if we can get through this, us and the almighty Labor government. Onwards and upwards. Thanks for joining us today. Signing off.